You prayed, you waited, you prayed again, but silence. The sky feels closed, as if your voice is hitting a wall and coming back. And a terrifying question grows inside. What if God is not hearing me? Or even more frightening, what if He is hearing me, but choosing not to answer? Have you ever asked that question? If you have, you are not alone. And that question does not make you weak. But if you misread it, you can stay stuck in the wrong place for years. Today we are going to talk about the heaviest truth about God's silence. And this truth is very different from what you think. Most believers interpret God's silence this way. I did something wrong. God has moved away from me. Maybe we were never close. And these interpretations are very dangerous, because a wrong interpretation leads to a wrong conclusion. A wrong conclusion either pushes you toward guilt or toward hopelessness, or the most dangerous one, toward giving up. But know this, God's silence is not God's absence, and understanding this is one of the most critical turning points of faith. This is more serious than you think, because misreading God's silence can keep you away from real transformation for years. It cannot end your faith, but it can freeze it. And a frozen faith is more dangerous than a dead faith, because you will not even realize it. Here are the 5 truths behind God's silence. First, sometimes silence is God's process of growing you. Think of a child. A parent who does everything the child wants does not raise them. Sometimes the greatest love is allowing them to wait. God is not here to please you. He is here to mature you. Romans 5 verses 3-4 says, we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. Silence is sometimes not a punishment. It is a production process. David cried out in Psalm 13, how long, Lord, will you forget me forever? And this was not a sin. This was an honest prayer. God put that prayer in the Bible, so crying out in silence is not faithlessness. Sometimes it is the deepest faith. Second, sometimes silence is a sign that you are asking for the wrong thing. You can ask for the wrong thing with the right voice, and God may not give it because He is protecting you. James 4:3 is very clear. You ask and do not receive because you ask with wrong motives. But be careful. This does not apply to every unanswered prayer. Sometimes God says no. Sometimes He says, not yet. And sometimes the answer has already come, but not in the format you expected. The important question is this: what are you asking God for? God Himself, or what God can give you? Third, sometimes silence is not a connection problem, but a listening problem. God did not stop speaking. Maybe you stopped listening. And it is easy to say that. But really think about it. How much time are you spending in God's Word? How many minutes are you sitting in real silence, without your phone, just to listen? Look at Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 19. God was not in the powerful wind. He was not in the earthquake. He was not in the fire. God came in a still, small voice. If your life is constantly full of noise, you cannot hear that still voice. This is not God's silence. This is your noise. Fourth, sometimes silence is a sign that you are in the middle of a test. Think of Abraham. When God called him to offer Isaac, He did not speak during the entire journey. He just said, go to the mountain. And Abraham went. And at the exact critical moment, God intervened. But Abraham kept walking through all that silence, because some things are built without words. Trust is not built with words. It is built by walking through silence. If you are in the middle of silence right now and you are still walking, this is not weakness. This is the deepest obedience. Fifth, sometimes silence is a sign that what has already been said is enough. God has already spoken. In the Bible, in His Word, in creation, on the cross. Sometimes while waiting for a new voice, we ignore the answer that has already been given. 2 Peter 1 verse 3 says, His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness. Everything. Already. Maybe you are waiting for a new revelation, but God is waiting for you to trust what has already been given. Now I need to say something very important. God's silence is sometimes genuinely heavy, and you do not have to attach a meaning to every silence. Sometimes life is just heavy. Sometimes loss is real. Sometimes pain cannot be explained with words. And God knows this. Remember Job. God did not answer him for a long time. And Job's friends kept trying to find a meaning. They always assigned a reason. And who did God become angry with in the end? The friends, because they tried to explain every pain. Some silences are just silence, and it does not mean God is not there. So what will you do now? First, stop reading silence as punishment. Ask this today: God, what are you trying to teach me in this silence? Asking this question may be more important than receiving an answer. Second, reduce the noise. Just for one day, put down your phone, turn off the music, stop the podcast, and sit in real silence. Even for 5 minutes, God comes in a still, small voice. Third, go back to what has already been said. Open the Bible. Find a verse that once touched you, and remember that it is still valid, because God's word does not expire. God's silence is not God's end. And continuing to walk in this silence is one of the greatest acts of faith. Job said in the middle of his pain, "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." This is not resignation. This is depth. If you are in the middle of silence today and you are still here, that matters. Write this in the comments. God, even in your silence, I trust you. Let that not just be a comment, let that be a declaration of faith. And if this message touched you, subscribe to this channel. Because here we do not just produce content, we pursue real transformation.